let's get it started. Thanks. Cool. Thanks those who are here for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your days to share this space with me. And I'm coming out of Kumeyaay territory here in Southern California, San Diego, 15 minutes away from the border, the so-called border. And we are in an interesting climate here. It's people always wonder how I got into mushrooms and fungi, being that I come from a coastal region, coastal desert region. We don't get much fungi out here. We get a lot of lichen and rock fungi. And so sometimes we got to look really closely to earth and to, soil, and to leaves and trees and rocks to find fungi and get our fungi fix on, but yeah, I'm fascinated with mushrooms and fungi in general, and they've taught me many lessons and shared many stories with me. So I hope today we could do a little bit of that, and I hope I can share some of these lessons and things that have helped me make sense of this existence we're in, and especially this past year. I really relied on mushroom teachings and mushroom lessons to just to remind me and fortify me and remind me of our strength and our resilience. And so with that, I'll be talking about a lot of mushrooms throughout Turtle Island, or this land that we call the land between the waters. And so I want to honor all those people, and I want to ask for forgiveness as well, in case I mispronounce names, in case I commit any offense or speak about things in a not the right way. My intention is to do things and speak about things in a good way, and I'm always willing to receive correction and be humbled in that way. And so saying with that, I also want to acknowledge the fact that there is currently a search to uncover burial sites, and we're up to over 400 children that have been uncovered in Canada and in the boarding schools across Turtle Island, and I'm sure these numbers are going to keep climbing. And so I really a heartfelt acknowledgement to all that heard throughout Turtle Island, to all the generations. It's been a hard couple of weeks. It's been a hard year, right? And and just receiving this news, it just opens up old wounds again. And and I apologize if throughout this talk it gets heavy, and we do a little bit of that. The intention is not to leave you with open wounds, but to acknowledge these things and to face them head on, and hopefully we can walk away with a little ease in our hearts, and a little healing if possible. If that is done today, I'd be honored to help facilitate any part in that. So again, I'm going to take a moment here. I'm lighting a little bit of fire here, some smoke and some sage and some chaga mixture that I have here to honor folks all across Turtle Island who use smoke medicine to cleanse themselves and to take up their prayers up into the ether, into the creator. And so just want to thank all those two-legged and four-legged creatures and beings and fungal relatives who are with us, past, present, and future. At this time, I'd like to invite you all to acknowledge where you're at, the lands you're on, the lands you're occupying, acknowledge your ancestors if they're here with you, those who have passed. If you have a relative or ancestor who's informed your path and you find strength in, give them a shout out and honor them and honor where you're at. You could do that in the chat, or you could do that, you could say it out loud. Either way, we want to honor them. And so I want to honor my great-grandmother, Antonia Miranda, and my great-grandmother, Mario Ceballos. And in a minute, I'm gonna start sharing my screen and we'll kind of get into our talk about fungi and mushrooms. Thanks those who are just joining us too. Steve, can you help me share my screen? Thank you.
Yes, I think should be good.
Okay, well, let's get this up. Cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here. I'm gonna be doing, my style of talking is informed and influenced by talking circles. And so, I've had to adapt my style to the Zoom structure. And so for that, I just want to ask for your patience and forgiveness. It's been said that I'm scattered and unorganized, and it's been said that I'll take you through a little journey. It gets heavy, it gets light, and we'll do that a few times. And so, don't be afraid to ask questions in the chat. Sneha's going to be helping us out in the chat. If you have any questions or need me to clarify something, feel free to do that. Another thing we'll be doing is, just don't be afraid to laugh when that happens. And like I said, I know I'll be talking about some serious stuff, but I also do so with all the seriousness and as well as the gentleness that our mother creator would instill in her children, right? And so yeah, I hope to share these messages in a good way with y'all today. Feel free to stop us and let me know if you need more clarification. And so, I wanted to also acknowledge the artist, Jazz Fuentes of Crystallized Bones, for this art, and that is basically, this year's theme has been reclaiming our relationships with fungi, in particular with Huitlacoche. Huitlacoche is a really amazing fungus that grows on corn, transforms and transmutes corn into this whole different being. And so, we've been taking that lesson throughout this year, actually. And, this thing that seemingly seems ugly and that has a name in American agriculture or in English as a smut fungus. We've trying to reclaim it and remind our people of the beauty in this fungus and its nourishing properties, as well as its its story and lessons that it has to teach us. And so a thing I like to do is we're gonna doing a lot of honoring today, right? And that's what POC Fungi community is about. It's a little bit different from other mycology clubs or other science clubs or other folks engaging with nature or mushrooms. We see it as our duty we learn what we can and pass it on to the next generation of medicine keepers, knowledge keepers. And so it's important to us to do that in a good way. I always want to acknowledge Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who also has been really influential in how we've established our philosophies, our view of the world, our pluralistic view of the world. And so, just wanting to honor Kimmerer today with her quote here. A quick acknowledgement about the names that we're using, Indigenous names and common names, Indigenous words. There's a bit of irony when speaking about Indigenous culture and language and traditions and using English, right? And so, as I'm thankful that we're able to communicate, and but just a reminder of our expanding and understanding of these things, and also our limitedness when trying to really grasp Indigenous worldviews and cosmology or cosmogony. But there are some words to be familiar with that I'll be throwing around today in case you're not if you don't know what ethnomycology is. It's the study of mycology or fungi or mushrooms in relation to humans, and the way we use them, the way they influence us, the way we eat them, we use them for spiritual purposes, all of these things, the way they've influenced our society. And so, another thing I want to kind of point out is this idea of reciprocity and being intersectional. These are both Indigenous value. These words have become popular recently. Especially the word reciprocity. And there's a bit of misunderstanding I've seen as far as what that is, and I think there's a bit of a capitalist view or a Western view of what reciprocity looks like. And so, just trying to remember what Indigenous view and meaning of that is hopefully what we can really understand by the end of today's talk. And being intersectional, a term made really popular by Kimberly Crenshaw Williams, was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw Williams, Black feminist. Did a lot of work with really what the word means is intersectional. It's exactly what it means, right? It means all things are connected. It means, and especially in relation to social justice movements and the feminist movements. And so, we at POC Fungi community see all of these things, from an Indigenous view, and we inform ourselves using the values of intersectionality, reciprocity, and fungi, right? This mycelial network that it's built, that's literally intersecting with plants and mushrooms and insects and trees and all these organisms, to us. So we see all these things as literal, metaphorical lessons and ways of viewing, again, that are all informed by Indigenous thought. And so I stay away from using a lot of black and white photos of Indigenous people just because I don't want to perpetuate the view of Indigenous people as something from the past, something, that of people that don't exist anymore, because Indigenous people, especially, people native here to the Americas or Turtle Island, are still everywhere. And sometimes people expect us to look different, expect us to look the way we looked in books and the way we, the way we're portrayed in shows and TV. And so, I just want to remind you all, and just those here who, just that we could be mindful of when we do that, when we talk about Indigenous people, when we portray Indigenous people and Native people, that we're doing it in a good way. Because this is what an Indigenous person looks like. And this is another one here on the screen here that I'm about to show. And, these are all just images of folks that have been native here using mushrooms, sharing knowledge, sharing medicines for millennia, since time immemorial. And that's what all nations and people creation stories explain. And so, with that, I want to kind of trans over into this Huitlacoche, and I'm going to start talking about Huitlacoche a little bit. I'm going to go a little quick through these because I have a lot of slides, and I want to leave some room for discussion. But if there's at any point you want to see one of these slides or you want me to stop and we could talk about it, please just let me know. And Sneha, you can throw it in the chat. I can't really see the chat right now, so Sneha will let me know if there's a question. And I'm gonna kind of just keep going. But yeah, as we transition over into this, let's talk about mushrooms, in particular the corn truffle, right? That is this name that people have been trying to make more popular because it's more appealing. It's when you hear corn truffle, or another great word that I've heard is corn caviar. It doesn't sound as bad as corn smut or the devil's corn, or it's not as hard to say as Huitlacoche or Huitlacoche. And so, I think there's a little bit of danger when we do that, and I'll explain a little bit why. But before, I want to explain a little bit about the history of corn and Huitlacoche. So corn was domesticated over 8,000 years ago. There's this great ancient alchemy that came out of the practice of growing corn, right? And corn, those who know or taking any botany classes know that corn is one of the first modified plants, right? Through agricultural and seed selection, agricultural domestication, and through genetics, we're able to select strains of this grass known as Del Simple, and created corn out of it. Well, there was this fungus that was growing on Del Simple, and that was the Huitlacoche, that was Huitlacoche. And so this fungus has evolved with the corn, that was on the grass, evolved with the corn that we know today, and it's only found on this grass or this corn. And you won't see Huitlacoche or Huitlacoche on any other plant. And so anybody who's grown corn, which all indigenous people have, was born out of Mexico, Central Valley of Mexico, and traded all the way up to northern First Nations people in Canada, where they can still grow it, and all the way down south to South America. And so, and even recently in the past 500 years, it was also, African people also grow corn and know it well. And all of these people have a connection or a story about Huitlacoche, and they all know Huitlacoche. But for some reason, when corn enters the American agricultural industry, it becomes a devil's corn. It becomes a blight. It becomes a plague. It becomes something bad and ugly that can be used to turn into refined sugars and oils and all the plastic products that are made out of corn these days. And so, just to kind of mention, this commodification, we're going to be coming out with a zine soon about the commodification of the sacred. Sneha helped create some of the art for that, the cover art, and we're talking about psilocybin mushrooms, we're talking about chaga, and different things. But one thing we don't mention, but we're going to be mentioning it throughout the year, and make sure it's always mentioned, is the commodification of corn. Corn is a sacred plant to all indigenous people, native people here in the Americas and Turtle Island, Anahuac. And it's been turned into commodification. It's been turned even to a poison, right? There's even diets and things that'll tell you to stay away from corn and tell you that corn's bad for you. And so, anytime I hear something like that, I wholeheartedly reject it. But yeah, just wanted to quickly talk about that history of Huitlacoche that evolved with corn. Corn being a staple food that has fed us and kept us nourished for so long. And so there was this push in the 80s, 90s, and especially recently, as people start traveling to Mexico and Oaxaca, and they come back and they open up their own cool hip restaurants, and they bring back recipes and foods that they found or experienced, in the hills of Oaxaca and the mountains from traditional people, traditional food, and that hasn't been changed in in hundreds of years. And they come back, and sometimes they sell it back to these audiences, and it's called cultural appropriation. It's called a lot of other words, but there's also been this push to rebrand Huitlacoche and name it things like the Mexican truffle or the corn truffle or corn caviar. And so this is the problem with that is when you start rebranding food, you basically start to erase a people, and it is indigenous erasure when you change the name of these foods, because what happens is you begin to easily forget who these foods were cultivated and grown by and revered by. And so I want to implore us all to use or try to find out indigenous words, indigenous names to different plants, different foods, especially if in your bioregion. I think it's a way of it's a form of reciprocity, of giving back. It's a form of being in solidarity. It's a form of preservation and so much more. And so I just want to hope we incorporate that into our practices a little bit more. Give me 1 second. And so I wanted to talk about, the way we name things, and the way we view things. And there was this, as I was researching the word Huitlacoche, there's like this debate going on about it, especially with linguists. It's translated into raven's excrement, and to different things like that. And there's a bit of a debate on it as to what exactly it means. It's split up into 2 words. But this thing was forwarded to me by Speak Nahuatl. They do language revitalization and teach different indigenous languages to children and people of all ages. And so I read this. This was out of the Florentine Codex. And I was like, why would they mention this? And I think as I was sitting with it reminded me of why things are named the way they are, especially in indigenous views. And so I'm gonna read this out real quick. And when the rains were about to end, when they were soon to finish, to close, then the Huitlacoche bird cried. A forecast that continual soft rain was about to set in. Then came the gulls, and also came the falcons, flying with much clamor. And they forecast when would come the ice and that it would freeze. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, why is that mentioned? There's no mention of of mushrooms there. But what it is, they're viewing, you're observing nature. You're observing nature all the time. And so there's this Huitlacoche bird is basically like a raven. It's basically the crows, right? These, and if you think about during the South, during the winter in northern hemispheres, this is when all the birds begin to migrate south and into these, especially into the Central Valley of Mexico, right? These are the areas where a lot of birds and insects migrate to. And so, so to me, what's going on is indigenous people are observing nature, and they named this mushroom by observing what happens, what's going on around it. And so it's not necessarily naming the thing, right? You're just naming what's happening. It's kind of like the same thing with that word popoe for popoe, which is a word that Robin Wall Kimmerer refers to as the name for mushrooms, and which literally translates to as the force that comes up from beneath. And so you're not naming the thing, because that would almost like give us dominion over it, right? And so you're just naming what's happening. You're observing and sharing what's happening. And so that's the same thing what's going on here. It's basically you're observing this time of the season where the birds return. It's about to rain, and this is a fertile time for Huitlacoche to grow. Huitlacoche's life cycle is really interesting. It basically grows on the stalk of on the kernel. Once these kernels rupture, the spores kind of disperse, and they can land on another corn, but usually like the more seasonal way of it growing, or the more organic way of it growing, is these spores will go into the soil. They land in the soil and they overwinter. And so they basically get carried in the next season, get carried through the root system. They can be introduced directly into the corn. That's how modern methods, they do it now, to try to cultivate it and encourage it to grow. But the more natural way of doing it would have just been allowing the season to do its job, and allowing the nature to finish its process, letting the spores overwinter in the soil. And so to me, there's this great, capturing of essences that happens with Huitlacoche. First in the stage of the corn, that it's when it's there, reaching, up for the sun, photosynthesizing, turning sugar and light into sugar, into, all these sucrose pathways, so that eventually the spores that are in the ground, in la tierra, in the mother, in this dark, wet, womb-like space, are germinating and are being born and are being, I don't want to say infecting, but are entering the roots system, right? And they lay dormant in the root system. They kind of creep up as the plant grows, and they kind of just chill in the cells and the cell walls of the plant. Eventually, once the kernel is grown, they figure out there's a sucrose pathway there. There's corn somewhere. And so now they kind of activate and will get into the cell wall of the corn and turn the kernels into Huitlacoche. So to me, just seeing that, and capturing both of those essences, the sun, the earth, and then them morphing and turning this corn into a whole new product that's known as Huitlacoche, because literally the cells have been changed from inside out. They've been changed, they've been transformed, and now it's Huitlacoche. And so, to me, it represents this between worlds, this between this gray spectrum that we're in. And, I think there's this way of viewing Huitlacoche as this intermediary, this beautiful, fungal relative that's, I think coming at an interesting time. I don't think there's any, I don't believe in coincidences. And so I don't think there's any coincidence that it's kind of having its return, to the spotlight right now. And it's, it's challenging modern agriculture or American agriculture. It's challenging, the use of pesticides and because if you're using pesticides or GMO corn, you're not going to get Huitlacoche. Huitlacoche is popular in Mexico and in other parts of the world because they're not using GMO corn. And so now we're seeing a lot more organic farmers growing corn. And so we're also seeing a lot more Huitlacoche growing now. And so some people are like wondering, what is this thing? They're posting it. And a lot of people are, for the first time, are trying it in the past, 5 years, 10 years. But way more so recently that we see a lot more organic growers and folks opting out of using GMO corn seeds. So yeah, be on the lookout. And if you haven't already, for Huitlacoche. And again, that's the same art that crystallized bones is memorializing for us. And so, I kind of want to take a pause here, and just, maybe pause for any comments, any questions, before I move on to another mushroom. I want to just say that reclaiming Huitlacoche is a means to subvert erasure and restore our connection to the land and our fungal kin. And it is imperative we do so. So, yeah. Do we have any questions? Corn, yes. All right, y'all quiet. Maybe I stumped y'all, huh? I give you a lot to think about. I'm gonna tell myself that so I can continue. I get it. Any questions? I'm gonna give y'all another minute.
Mario, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you speak about how you prepare and enjoy this wonderful fungus?
Yes, this is a quick little graph. This is the last graph you'll see from me today. But that's quickly how it kind of, that's the life cycle. If you like, I could come back to that and explain it a little bit more. Something I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. I've had to consult with different like real mycologists to make sure I'm talking, I'm not talking out of my ass too much. And so it's yeah, it's super nutritious, and it's really one of the only foods that has lysine in it. Spirulina is one of the only other non-animal foods that has it in it. But it's found in meat, poultry, and cheese. And so, a lot of vegans, they'll take lysine supplements or eat spirulina to try to get that essential amino acid for muscle growth. But it's actually found, and it's super rich in Huitlacoche. And so when you mix it with epazote and you do, the nixtamalized corn, which nixtamalized corn, it basically, encourages, it brings out all the nutrition, actually, is what it does, and it makes it more bioavailable to our bodies. And so once that happens, you got a really nutritive dense food that can sustain a vegan diet and can sustain, farmers who are high up in the mountains and maybe don't have too much access to meat or fishing areas. And so, yeah, if we were together, if we were all in a circle and in real life, I would have passed around some Huitlacoche for you to taste and share and smell and touch and to really try to understand it. But I did my best and then created this video for y'all. You can kind of, I'm trying to bring it to you as intimate as I can. Those are everything black are the spores. And so basically, essentially what you're eating are spores. They're turning the corn inside, they're changing them molecularly, right? They're changing them on a cellular level. And they basically become, for lack of a better word, but just to try to, so we could all understand, they myceliate, right? the corn. Instead of mycelium though, which is classically white, it's black. It's all the inside will black. And then that eventually when that's in the liquid form, and that'll eventually dry up and become the teleospores. And so I'm going to forward just a little bit. This is epazote. It's a really bitter herb, really high in minerals. This is me chopping up some garlic and the epazote and some onion. And I'm throwing, that's some cordyceps ghee that Olga sent me. No, cordyceps, tell me again if you're here, some fat, some pork fat. And so I threw that in with some onions, some garlic. Lard, thank you. Yeah, and then I just threw the Huitlacoche in there. You saute it. I mean, it does require heat still, like other mushrooms require heat. Definitely still requires heat, but I don't know. There's somebody was asking me recently about like burning it and stuff. I'm like, well, like mushrooms, you can burn them too, but they're kind of hard to burn because there's so much water content in them. And so, yeah, just kind of making sure all your other vegetables are cooked is kind of the way I know when it's done and when it looks good. Because people are asking like, how do you know when it's done? Then I'm like, I mean, you know, when you're cooking and you'll know it's done. Like, you see all your other vegetables are cooked and looks good to eat. You know, you'll once you keep cooking with it, you kind of start to learn what it's like. And so this is me pressing some tortillas. And I'm gonna start building some quesadillas. This is some queso Oaxaca. It's a string cheese. My friend Patty Cation saw this and was like, "Hey, that's Armenian cheese," because she's from Armenia. And to my knowledge, Indigenous people, Native people weren't making any cheese on Turtle Island. We weren't making cheese. And so, this definitely came from Europe, from Spain, from cheesemakers. And so, yeah, in Armenia, they have the same cheese, only it's like peppered. It has pepper all over it. But this, what we call it, I know it as queso Oaxaca, which is cheese from Oaxaca. It's like the style of cheese, I guess. And so here I am building some quesadillas, and it's super yummy as a quesadilla with cheese, and it has this really earthy taste, classic mushroom taste, also with some like sweetness as well. Like, you can still taste a little bit of the corn. Yeah, it's really yummy, and it takes on whatever, with some onion and garlic, it's amazing, super yummy. And so this is a little video of me making that to explain how, so you guys can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. If you find some, you can make it at your house. I think sometimes just looking at how the way people cook and seeing it, be eaten will like encourage folks to do it, and like sometimes it breaks the fear a little bit. So I hope that's what I'm doing with this. As I know I'm like showing off a little bit, but really I hope it's like it can help you, break any stigma or your fear around eating Huitlacoche, which I get it. I was a little concerned if I was gonna like it when I first had it too, and so yeah, it's now that I did have it, I love it, and I have some in my refrigerator. I might even show y'all. Any questions about that? Any other questions?
Yes, Mario. How did you get your Huitlacoche?
Oh, you want to hear that story?
A little bit.
Well, fortunately, I live 15 minutes away from the border. So what I do is I cross the border, and for lack of a better word, I don't declare it when I cross the border. So I, kind of have to smuggle it back in, which is something I'm willing to do as a traditional food. I'm willing to, speak on it and inform any customs agent if they want to make a fuss about it, that, it's that I have rights to my indigenous food, right? And so Yeah, yesterday I actually went and I did about 3.5 hours in, at the borderway coming from Mexico back into the US. And so, yeah, I get my car checked and the whole car gets banged on, making sure there's no drugs in the seats or in the back or anything. And they open up all my bags and check and see what I have. And so, there's this bit of a risk of, or, just anxiety involved in trying to access this food. And so, we have seen folks grow it, and it's usually always done accidentally, here on this side of the border. When folks have seen grow it, or they'll send me pictures and they're like, what is this? Is this Huitlacoche? And I'm like, yep, you got it. They usually have like maybe 1 or 2 tops of it. But, I've tried finding it at specialty produce stores, and I've left messages at some of these like high-end like restaurant store, like warehouses, where they get fancy mushrooms at and stuff. And, I don't get their call back. And so, yeah, I've had to resort into going to TJ, into Tijuana, and bringing it back and doing what I had to do to taste it and bring it into our homes and stuff. So let me show you what I'm doing too, actually. Let me see. I don't know if you could see, I'm making some Huitlacoche in mezcal. And so this is I've been learning that it's mezcal, Huitlacoche and mezcal is actually used for vertigo and for dizziness. And so I've been making medicine out of it as well. There's a lot of information about Huitlacoche also being used in birth work or abortion work. And so that's a whole nother talk actually as well. And so, maybe just to mention, if you are going to eat Huitlacoche and you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant, you may want to consult your doctor, or just limit the amount of Huitlacoche that you do eat, because it's known to have to cause labor contraction. And so, to do that though, it's not cooked, and usually the juice, the raw form of it is squeezed, and a juice is squeezed out of there, and that juice is drank directly. Super bitter, super gross. I don't recommend doing it, but this is a thing of last resort. This is not a medicine that was used quickly, or like it was usually a medicine of last resort, as far as like birth work goes and abortion work goes. So there's a lot of other plants to do that, but as I'm talking about it and making praising Huitlacoche, I should also mention that as well, in case anybody's planning to get into it. It's something to mention, and I am always here to provide more information about that if anybody needs more information about that. Are we on time? Oh, cool. Any other questions? I'm gonna look at the chats real quick. What do we do with metaphor? Oh. All right, well, I'm gonna.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mario.
Tell me.
Olga here. Okay. Do you wait for it to spore for it to be used, or y'all like it could be eaten like as like how it's like gray, or do you wait for it to be like black?
You wait for it to be. You want it to be fully. Let me show you. Actually, give me a sec.
Okay.
So I have another piece of Huitlacoche right now. And so, oh shoot. this darn filter. You know, my kid put on this background for me, and I don't even know how to take it off anymore. So basically, what I'm trying to show you. Let me see if it happens. Nope, doesn't want to happen. Hold on. You're waiting for it to. This is kind of hard to see here anyway. So anyway, well, when they rupture, you can still eat them. You're still eating spores, right? But that's when it's ready to that's when it's ready to sporulate, right, and to spread. You're not waiting for it to turn black necessarily. Because when you cut into it, if you've seen in the video, I probably skipped over it. It's kind of gray inside still, and there is a lot of black area, but it's all edible. Is what I'm trying to say too. Is what I'm trying to get to. It's all edible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
At every stage, it's edible.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Mario. I had a question about vertigo and dizziness treatment with using Huitlacoche and mescal. Is it something that's like a synergistic effect, or do they both have this property separately?
No, I would assume it's. Well, just to mention, I believe everything, like on all medicines, have some synergistic effect. Especially on different bodies and different, especially on different bodies, and so there has to be, but it doesn't. It's the mescal is only used in this is for the extraction purposes. It's not really used, because of its synergistic effect. If anything, if you wanted to make some sort of a synergistic blend, I would probably add another like a nervine herb to it, like some milky oats or something like that, to create like a more synergistic medicine. But the mescal in this case is really just used for extraction and for preservation. And you only need like a mescal, which is about 40%, 40 proof, I believe. You don't really need like a high proof alcohol. That's why I use mescal. And I think there's the regions. There's something about mescal, being an indigenous spirit, and then the Huitlacoche that calls to me to breed them together. So in that way, there is like some ancestral synergistic medicine, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Are we good? Should we talk about another mushroom? I'm going to take that as a yes. Well, another favorite mushroom of mine that I've also learned a lot from, and that has provided a lot of lessons and assurance, provided a lot of stories too, and a lot of community building, is the vulture tail. Asterium, hirsutum, or Osteria. I think back east y'all got Osteria. There's sometimes a debate about the names, and they're a little different in different regions. In my region, this is what it looks like. And that's what the bottom of it looks like. Y'all have a slightly different one over there. And then honestly, sometimes they look different because they have algae growing on them. Sometimes they're a little weathered, and the color, they're discolored a little bit. And so the thing about this mushroom though, is that when people find it, when they seen it, did anybody think of turkeytail mushroom? I was in a class, I could see y'all. Yeah, a lot of people confuse this for turkeytail mushroom, and so it has the common name false turkeytail. And so I was taking walks out with community members. We were doing little nature walks, mushroom walks, and this mushroom is prolific, especially down here after a rainy season. It grows on oak trees, and this area, the Kumeyaay people here were also known as the oak people. They cultivated, or yeah, I would say cultivate wild tended acorn trees and oak trees, and to gather acorns. And so, you know, so oaks are abundant out here, and you know they're always falling and dying. And so, this mushroom is one of the first, you know, like the white rot mushroom. So it's one of the first organisms to come in and begin like the decaying process, and breaks down the lignin and trees and oak, and it allows for other, you know, organisms to come in and finish up that process of cleaning up the, you know, cleaning up the area, and so the environment. And so when we were walking, you know, I kept having to explain it's fall Turkeytail, and there was always like this, oh, you know, like everybody's like, oh, Turkeytail. No, it's fall Turkeytail. Oh, and I was like, you know, I think I was realizing that I'm cultivating this idea of this mushroom being this lesser being, and I was like, and people were just disappointed every time at it, and like, oh, like not the one that I wanted, right? And so I was realizing we're walking into nature, valuing things, walking into nature, already placing value on what's good for us, what's not, what's useful to us, and what's not, and that it isn't. We were quick to discredit it, quick to diminish it, quick to be disappointed by it, not be interested in it, not give it any value at all. And so we wanted to change that. I was like, that's not how I want to cultivate this group. You know, this is not what we're going out into nature for, is not to go in and evaluate and be taxonomically correct and all these things. We wanted to cultivate, you know, this appreciation for nature and like a different view of nature. And so, you know, jokingly, we were like, we need to come up with another name. And my little one was around 8 at the time. He was like, how about Vulture Tail? And we all kind of laughed like, yeah. And then, you know, I think he was just keeping in the theme of tails and birds. And so we're like, yeah, Vulture Tail, like Turkeytail, Vulture Tail, that's perfect. But as we were thinking about it, we're like, wait, this mushroom actually, you know, in nature comes in and cleans up, you know, dead material, kind of the same way vultures do. You know, they'll come out into an environment and make sure the area is clean of any dead matter, any dead animals and carcasses. And so we're like, you know what, it actually fits perfectly. It is a vulture tail, you know? And so, you know, we've been cultivating this idea, this view, this perspective of seeing this mushroom for what it is. You know, it's one of the most important organisms in our ecosystem here, actually. It's abundant, it's everywhere, and it's beautiful, and it has even some medicinal properties and other cool things like people making paper out of it. And so Sneha here used a vulture tail to make paper, and other mushrooms to make pigments, and added to this paper, and really solidified what my little one, you know, jokingly said one day to this piece of work that we were so honored by, and my little one is super proud of. When we see it and we talk about the name, he's like, I named it, right? That's me, I did that. And so, you know, I see that in him being so proud of like naming, you know, this mushroom, and we are the one that validates him, right? You know, his community does. And so there's something about him and this perspective and like this healing that has happened, as far as, you know, having a place in mycology, having a place in nature, having the withal to name something, right? A better name, give it a better name, that's more conducive to their understanding, you know, and because they understood that I didn't have to, you know, de-assimilate, break down any, you know, any constructs that he already had, like the way us adults have, right, with our years of assimilating and you know, yeah, you know. And so I was just so proud of that moment, of our community's moment, my little one's moment, and especially of Sneha, who's able to do this for us. And so thank you, Sneh, for honoring us and honoring Vulture Tail. And, you know, if you ever see this mushroom out in nature, go sit with it, pick some, thank it, and thank you for its amazing work that it's doing in the environment and the ecosystem around you. Because now, not everything in nature was meant for us to take or for us to use. And I think that's a big lesson that it's had for us and our community, the way we walk, the way we appreciate and the way we value things. And so, and people, I think it was a lesson that translated into how we do that with people as well. And so, yeah, thanks again for this art. I'm looking at the chats and see the orange like that. The question about, is it always orange like that? Almost always. Oops. Oh, going back. Almost always like that. Go backwards. You know, going forward. Sorry. They do look different though. Sorry. They do look a little different, especially in the East Coast. It's almost always like that. Sorry. Especially here in Southern California. And it looks like parchment on the other side. Any questions, any reflections, anything anybody wants to share about this? Have you seen it in your ecosystem? Have you, done the same thing to it and maybe walked by it, disappointed? Yeah, just wondering.
Yeah, I recently have been giving some like mushroom walks with my job. And yeah, that's something that I've been, like feeling a little disappointed by the people who come, because like, I'll ask them like, oh, why'd you come today on this walk? And some people are like, oh, I just like have been getting into mushrooms, new pandemic activity. But some people are just mostly interested in like what they can get from the fungus, like they're like, I want to see Turkeytail, I want to see chaga, I want to know, and they're like, and I try to cultivate a sense of like, okay, but this is a organism that's important beyond what it gives to us, because it's giving so much more than like a gourmet experience.
Right. 100%. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I completely understand and resonate with that. That's exactly why we wanted to rename it and place more value on it, right? So I'm gonna kind of continue. If we have time, I could talk about a whole nother mushroom. We could talk about chaga a little bit actually, unless y'all are done or want to talk or anything. Otherwise, this one will probably end. Let's see. I think I shared this in the reading. I think I shared another book, but this is also something I've been working on, and I think just it's a good way to stop here or pause here for a minute. Some of the work, around rematriation to the land, around, creating more community, creating more symbiotic relationships. These ideas aren't new. I want to just mention, a lot of people have been talking about this, especially Indigenous people. Person Dennis Martinez up in Northern California, they're doing a lot of work around sustainability and traditional ecological knowledge and restoration. And so, this movement, I'll say, I don't want to say idea anymore. This movement is, I think there's a lot to be said, and I think we're all moving. I think those who are like-minded are seeing these things, these patterns in nature, these examples in nature of how to be in reciprocity, how to be in, how to be transparent and being more participatory. I think these lessons are everywhere. Mushrooms are teaching us those lessons, especially. But these lessons can be found in trees and in plants and in the soil, especially. These complex webs of beings and chemicals, and it's just amazing. And so, I want to just like urge us to look at those things, look at those patterns, look at those examples and receive those lessons and try to implement them in our communities and in our circles. And so, yeah, participation is the undeniable essence of ecological restoration, because ours is an active practice that requires participation in its planning, implementation, and management. Unlike hands-off preservation, restoration depends on an active reciprocal engagement with the land and with all the beings, including humans who live there. As restorationists, we are obliged to meaningful, thoughtful participation as part of our practice. And so, I think there's a lot of nihilism going on these days, and a lot of folks, just, with the whole Anthropocene, and I want to make sure we're also cultivating, a sense that we're a part of this thing, and especially, Indigenous people all over the world have had an impact, a positive impact on their environment. It's only until recently in history that we've had a negative impact. And so, just restoring that, remembering that, and that we are part of nature, and we are, part of the solution, and not, as some will, teach us or tell us that, we're the cause of all this. And that's, I don't disagree with that, but we, a lot of people see us like, people as like this plague as well, right? And I see a lot of this talk is becoming more popular, around, especially with this pandemic, the talk has gotten really heavy in certain ways. And so, yeah, I just want to redirect that a little bit and remember that we're a part of this, and we're part of the solution, we're part of nature, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of too. And so, yeah, I just want to celebrate everyone who's here and showed up to do that, to be part of it, right? To be part of that restoration, be part of this new story that we're trying to tell. And so these are a few places to redistribute wealth to, people who are doing work to preserve Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous medicine, Indigenous sovereignty. And so, if you've ever benefited in any way and you feel called to share, redistribute wealth, to the First Nations people here on the left, or the Congreso Nacional Indígena, or the Mazatec people in the Mazatec Mountains, those are some good resources there. Recently, there's also I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a minute. There was also a campaign to open up a clinic, an autonomous clinic, for the Huitlacoche people, the Huichol people, which are the peyote protectors in Jalisco. And so, if you also have means or folks who are able to, they're also trying to raise money right now for an autonomous clinic, health reasons. So it's a really important issue. You want to redistribute money in other places, and you trust me, you could always use it in our community as well for our fundraisers and medicine making and those things. And you could always, it's POC Fungi Community at Gmail for PayPal, and POC Fungi Community on other platforms, Venmo and Cash App and all that stuff. So, I'm willing to take some questions. We could do a little discussion and reflection, or if you want to spend another 10 minutes, I don't mind talking about another mushroom. But I want to hear y'all.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. This has been really informative, and I would love to hear more about other mushrooms if nobody else has other questions. So okay. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lee. Appreciate it.
I just have one question for you, Mario. It's just like I'm sitting and thinking about these two mushrooms you shared and imagining all the stories that are behind every mushroom and its relations to people for a long time, and even wanting to learn more about the growing shiitake mushrooms and the long history of human relationship with shiitake is interesting. And I'm just curious to hear a little about your journey and like asking questions and finding resources and like building these stories, because it's such a gift to share with us. And I think that we could all participate a bit in that. So I'm thinking about just to hear a little bit about how that's gone for you and how you've navigated those waters.
Yeah, thank you. That's been part of the magic, and it's been fun sharing that experience with folks like Sneha, folks like Olga, folks who who aren't here too, because it's been a journey that I couldn't do alone. There's been many moments where I wanted to, walk away and be like, this is a little bit too much, because it's not encouraged to find these stories, right? We're not encouraged to look at nature this way. We're not given the resources or the space to do it, really. And so I want to acknowledge my privilege too, the privilege that I've been afforded, especially by people like my partner who's taking on the responsibility of providing for our household. And so, I used to work in the medical field, and I took a year off of work to stay home with our children and take care of our kids. And that was 8 years ago. And so, but in that time, with my kids, I would take them on nature walks, and it gave me time to explore things that interested me. Being a naturalist, I love insects and plants and succulents and yeah, just all things nature, right? And birds and so mushrooms were always one of those super fascinating things to me, but that always seemed like unattainable, something that I couldn't get into because, for whatever reason, because I would go to these mycological clubs and I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I didn't see anybody that wanted to talk about the things that I wanted to talk about, things like indigenous medicines, things like traditional knowledge and names. People would get offended and about that I was even asking those questions. Why are you why are you poking around there? And so so later, when I would it was funny, like a couple years later, I came back to the mycological club, but this time as a speaker, and I had people get up and walk out of my talk, and so it was cool though, because it showed the importance of doing this work, right, of uncovering this knowledge and these names. And so I realized I needed some support there. And so yeah, part of the journey has been building a community around uncovering these things, and allowing me the space to cultivate these stories and hear these stories, right? Listen to these stories, receive them. Because if I had to go to work 9 to 5 every week, and I probably wouldn't have time, if I was trying to survive, and probably wouldn't have time to do that work, right? To really receive those lessons, because it takes patience. I got to be quiet. I got to really, it's a meditative process. You got to sit in nature, and if I'm being rushed, it's not going to happen. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey. Receiving those lessons of patience, and to receive them, because you can't Google these, right? You can't Google a lot of these lessons, and where we're so used to just getting our answers, getting our things really quick. And so I think that's a huge one for me, is just cultivating that patience, right? To listen, and receive. So yeah, thank you for that question, Ashley. Appreciate it.
I just wanted to jump in and say, yeah, me and Mario talk on the phone quite a bit. And, a lot of these connections are just made through conversation, and just he'll say something, and then I'll share a reflection, and then we'll build off of that. And so, yeah, I think, it's really good if you have mushroom friends to hang out with them and just talk.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's exactly what happened. It's what I've been able to do in this time that I've had a home, that I've had being home with my children. And so, yeah, just a big thank you to them, my little ones, and all my community and my partner for doing that, because it's been a community endeavor for sure. Any other questions? Any other comments?
I have a question. Well, first I want
Yeah.
to say thank you so much. This was an amazing talk, and I really appreciate how thoughtful you are and the ritual that is going behind everything that you're doing. I just really appreciate what you're doing. And in terms of like reciprocity, you know, I think that looking to nature is so beautiful, and it's a really amazing metaphor for people to kind of like look to nature for a model for, you know, how that system kind of works. But I also wonder about like the actual changes that need to happen for someone to adopt that way of living. And if you have ever come across like someone's behavior has to change, like a lot of like the convenience culture of things would have to, you know, change. And I wonder if you've experienced people bringing that up to you, saying, you know, but I love ordering on Amazon, or like I love doing things the way I'm doing, and how they would maybe want to change that. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, and I was, you know, trying to touch on that a little bit. You know, that need to, you know, we do need to do a lot of, you know, I'll say deprogramming, but, you know, even that word has been used by a lot of new age people. And so you know, my intention is to, yeah, you know, I have come across a lot of that. And that's why one of the words I use is deassimilation, you know, because we've assimilated, right, to these Western ways of operating, competition, you know, wealth accruement. You know, we got to accrue wealth to feel successful, to feel secure. And so those are some of those structures that we need to break down, right? These you know, this idea that, you know, wealth will provide you the security and all those things that you need, you know, and you know, and I'm not saying as a person who comes from poverty, there is, it costs a lot to me to say those things, because I know the power of money and wealth, and I know what it can do, and I've seen it. You know, I've seen people who well-off people who have means to, you know, to even implement more change than I can, because I'm limited with my resources, right? And so, yeah, I come up with that up against that a lot. How do we navigate this time, this capitalist time, when we have to pay rent, when we have to pay for our cell phone bills, when we got to eat and put gas in our cars, right? You know, so there's this principle that I kind of fall on sometimes, and it provides a little bit of you know, it just lets me sleep at night, I guess. But there's this value, you know, it's one of the principles of the Zapatistas, the EZLN. They have 7 principles. One of those principles is construir y no destruir. And so that means construct and not destroy. And so, as you know, I don't identify as any political ideology. I've had to be in alignment or to explain where I'm at. It's probably more an existential anarchist, but or an indigenous anarchist, and just because I've had to put a label on it, but really it's just, you know, rewilding, rematuration, right? But you know, that lesson of construir y no destruir is important one for me, and again it helps me sleep, because it's this notion of you know, the indigenous people, you know, and the indigenous fight for land and for sovereignty and to protect the water and the land and the air. It's never been an intention to continue or perpetuate any systems of violence or of oppression at that, you know. And so that means, you know, there's this, you know, it's kind of a value of like nonviolence, right? Or like of, you know, not perpetuating more destruction. And so there is this value of like, there is this thought, an indigenous way in thinking that, you know, that even things that are not organic are actually organic, like, because everything is on this earth, nothing came from away from this earth, you know. So even all inorganic materials like plastic and cars and things, like, actually are a manifestation of nature, you know. And so And so, it's not that we want to, indigenous thought and perspectives aren't about destroying, the institution of science, aren't about destroying, progression or, or even doing away with, the industrial complex. It's mostly about how do we integrate? How do we be more in alignment? How do we be more reciprocal? And so, it's never been about, okay, we're gonna, we're gonna get rid of all of these things, destroy it all first, be anti-civ, which, I'm gonna let all anti-civ people be anti-civ, but, as far as indigenous people go and thought and culture goes, we're imagining and building for tomorrow. We're not just trying to destroy today, and so, yeah, as far as, dismantling, those, our system, of oppression and thinking, we gotta also be thinking about building new ways and how that's gonna look and stuff too. So that's kind of where I'm at with my energy and like where I spend my energy. Yeah, just trying to cultivate how we're gonna integrate that, how we're gonna build outside of capitalism, outside of monetary value, yeah, and valuing each other for the good things that we bring into our community, and so, yeah, I think it's it's simple and complicated at the same time, right? But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question fully. Thank you though for the question.
Mario, can I add something? I think another great way to, like, I guess, bring about this way of thinking for someone who might be more geared to, like, for like the scientific method or just sort of extracting things for their use value. I think maybe, like, for me, it's really good to work through art and make it an intersection between another subject. And then it's also helpful for me to try to personify the mushroom and, like, understand its formal qualities or understand its growth patterns and, like, try to personify it and try to understand it, like, as, as like how it functions naturally and how we could relate to it. And then lastly, bringing it back to the fact that mushrooms are our close ancestors. So there's just a lot for us to learn from them, to even, like, learn about us and how we function, just like how we breathe in air or how we, like, how we're heterotrophic and things like that. And I think when you make those connections, people can kind of see the mushroom as this, like, ancestor, this person, this body. And maybe that's a good way to, like, get people to think a little differently.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yes, thank you for saying that. I don't want to call you out, Sneha, but I think those are some of the conversations we've had before, right? About that question and, like, how do we come to terms with these things? And so, yeah, we've gone down the rabbit hole with some of those and some of these topics, and yeah, but thanks for saying that, Snake, because yeah, I do, that's where I spend my energy, and that's why I fall back onto the mushrooms for those lessons, for those examples, for for that gentleness and for those reminders, I guess, too, so thanks, Amanda, for your question, by the way.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Any other last minute questions before we wrap it up? Feel free to give me an email if you think of something, if you're still processing things and something comes up later and you want to ask. I'm here for that as well. I'm going to share my screen one more time. I was going to show something as I closed out. Let me see, where is it at? Sorry. Well, might as well, since it's up there. Can't ignore when you put that up, actually. There's this mushroom, Philenius igniarius, sacred mushroom, the tender conch mushroom, has a lot of different uses. And Modification of the Sacred is a zine that we've been writing for the past almost 8 months, maybe longer. We've gone through a lot to get it together. And in that zine, we mentioned this mushroom that has been used ceremonially in tobacco mixtures, in chew mixtures. When this mushroom is fired and turned into ash, it's then powdered and mixed with tobacco. And because of the alkaline ash, it makes it makes a nicotine more biologically available and enters your bloodstream more. So it makes your tobacco, your chew, your snuff that much more potent, like 10 times more potent. And so what's been going on in Alaska and different parts of the country, folk are going in. We also know the history of tobacco and that sacred plant and how that's been commodified and turned into a poison. And now this mushroom, which was once maybe harvested, very little, and maybe 1 or 2 used for ceremony and to make a pouch of what was considered good tobacco, is being harvested, by the hundreds of pounds. This is a 500-pound haul here that's going to be turned into ash and put into a tobacco mixture and then sold to indigenous communities as punk ash or Eskimo cocaine. And if that's not disturbing to you, then we need to do some work, because that's super, it's causing a lot of harm in Alaskan communities and in the Inuit communities there. And so there's this really high, there's a high level of cancer, mouth cancer, throat cancer, and even been affecting babies and unborn fetuses, because it's like often advertised as a cleaner tobacco. Since you're not smoking it, you can just chew it. It's like considered healthier. And so sometimes pregnant women will chew it. Grandmothers are known to use it and even share it with their children. And so there's this campaign to in those communities by the Indigenous and the Native Health Coalition to teach people to not use this potent mixture, and that it actually wasn't ever a traditional mix for the Inuit people. The Inuit people weren't known to use tobacco. They, if anything, used, I think it was balsam bark for smoking or recreation or ceremony. And so tobacco, and especially this mix, was introduced by Westerners into that area. And so it's causing a lot of harm. And, we're talking about this mushroom in the zine that's coming up. We're going to be releasing it on Sunday, summer solstice. And so, yeah, just something to think about, when we're, there's still another example of things that have been commodified, things that have been considered sacred at one point, nutritious and good for us, and then commodified and now turned into something that's poisonous. And so, like the way corn was and the way other things have become. And so being mindful of those things and, just not letting that happen anymore. Something that I'm trying to get out with the zine. That's the message, it's that we all need to take care of these traditions, take care of these people, take care of these plants, and take care of the way we're doing them, doing them justice and ingesting them and building relationships with them, because I know this isn't a good relationship. And like I said, it's causing a lot of harm in those communities. And so that was the last thing I wanted to say and just talk about. And thank you everybody again for showing up today and for being here and allowing me into your home, allowing my stories and stories that have come through my community and my ancestors to be shared with y'all. And I hope you received them well. And if, again, if I've caused any offense, I do apologize. And, I ask for your forgiveness in that way. Steve, I appreciate you. Thanks for the invite. And Sneha, thank you so much for taking care of the chat room and for your art and for always being in community with me. Much love to all of you. If there's anybody wants to say anything, I think I'm gonna get going. I gotta go make some dinner now.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Mario. We'll share this out and our community will continue to benefit from it. So thanks so much.
Awesome.
And we'll keep an eye out for that zine. That's exciting.
Yeah. Summer solstice.
Cool.
Thanks again, everybody. Be well.
Have a good night.
Take care. Go drink some water.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.